Welcome to Clean Coast's Waters and the Wild series, where we will speak with great achievers on various sea sports and hobbies. My name is Aidan and my co-host is Camilla, and Heather is assisting with the tech side of things. Clean Coast has been supporting community groups over many years, and each year we've seen real heroes emerge through their voluntary commitment and efforts for their local area in keeping the coast clean and the waters free from pollution. We are all connected by the sea, and through the series, we will speak with an elite group of people on various sea sports. Tonight's focus is on stand-up paddleboarding. This sport has had a surge of popularity around the world over the last decade. It is a sport that is accessible for all ages to do. It is also a sport, as we will soon see, that can be very competitive, but generally it is a calm sport that can be enjoyed not only by at the sea, but canals, rivers, and lakes too. It can be almost like a meditation. While maintaining balance, you have to be aware of wind, waves, and currents, and as much as possible, slow down to the pace of nature. As Cal Major said, gliding along the water, making little noise, and traveling slowly allows for a peaceful pace immersion into the natural world around us. For me personally, it is a sport that is luring me at every step of preparation leading up to this event. So I'm thrilled to have two great advocates for the sport with us tonight to share their personal stories with us. Paul Byrne is from Dublin and is a very experienced multi-sportsman with a number of ocean-related sports, including diving, boating, fishing, but he is pretty much as high as it gets with stand-up paddling. He is an Academy of Surfing Ireland master, SUP trainer, and runs Irish SUP and ASI accredited SUP school over the last decade. He has represented Ireland at the last two World Championships and also was the team manager. He organizes SUP races and SUP surf events and has traveled extensively abroad, including a long list of teaching and coaching qualifications with swimming in Australia. Paul, it is an honor to have you with us. Eoin Kernan is from Dublin's lovely peninsula Howth and is a passionate stand-up paddleboarder in recent years and an Academy of Surfing Instructors Level 1 instructor. Eoin has created an online community forum for new and experienced suppers who are based in Ireland, exchanging tips on gear and techniques, locations, and sharing the enjoyment of the sport. Eoin, I'm delighted that you will share your story with us tonight. Thank you. So now a quick question for you both. How or who got you first into the sport? Paul, would you like to go first? And just to say you're muted, that's it.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Aidan. Thank you, firstly, for inviting me along to talk on your platform tonight. My journey with SUP is a relatively short one, I suppose. If you look at the number of years, it's only 13 or 14 years in duration. My first experience with stand-up paddleboarding was in Broome in Western Australia about 14 years ago, when I saw a massive big surfboard sitting on the roof of somebody's car in a service station. I had no idea what it was. I knew it was a board of some kind. And I hung around the forecourt of the service station to chat with the lady that came out and discovered that it was a stand-up paddleboard. It was the first time I'd ever seen a stand-up paddleboard. A couple of months later in Torquay on the Great Ocean Road, I saw some guys surfing on these paddleboards, and that was it. I knew that this was something I had to explore. My background was in surfing. I came home to Ireland about 6 months later and brought in a couple of stand-up paddleboards for myself and my buddies. They were some of the first boards brought into the country, and it was from there that the whole journey, the whole stand-up paddleboarding journey begun for me. I was amazed how much attention we got. People thought it was apparitions and biblical sights that they were seeing, people standing on the water, walking on water. and there was a massive interest in people wanting to experience what it was we were doing. And I suppose that's where it all started for me. My background was education. I worked in the recreational scuba diving industry, and I said, okay, let's get more boards and let's get people on the water, and the rest is history.
And what a great portfolio you've developed. Eoin, how about you? Who or how did you first start?
Well, God, it first started by looking out that window over my shoulder and seeing probably some of Paul's buddies out on the water, or someone connected anyway with Paul, because it's funny, he says it's only a short journey that he's had, and yet he calls that 13 years. I'm only involved in the sport maybe 3 or 4 years, so realistically, I'm only a newbie compared to him. But very much the way it worked for me was I saw the sport in the water. I'd always been a water person. I swam and sailed for years, and I'd done a little bit of kayaking. So I saw this new thing on the water and says, I want a part of that. There wasn't a huge amount of boards in the country at that stage. It hadn't taken off like it's taken off now. So I managed to find a secondhand one over in Galway. And so I jumped in the car and I went over and picked up the board. Didn't know what I was buying. I just knew it was a stand-up paddle board. Didn't know whether it was going to be good or bad or indifferent. And came home and got out on the water. And really, I think really what attracted me immediately once I was on the water was two things. Number one, the like you said, it's that meditative state that you can get into when you're out on the water, and it's like nothing else. For me, everyone has their thing, but for me, it's that moment when you're out on the water. But second of all, unlike kayaking, where you're down on the water, sitting on the water, stand-up paddleboarding, while you can sit on the board, you can lie on the board, kneel on the board, whatever you want to do. When you stand on it, you get a full 360 view of your surroundings that you don't necessarily get in other sports. And to me, that's very special, that you can literally just turn your head and see everything around you. So it gives you a totally different perspective on the world.
Okay, thank you, Eoin. That's great. Camilla.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pop in now. So I just want to ask a question for Paul first. So it's a sport that's very accessible for all ages and doesn't rely on winds or currents to enjoy it. So as a trainer for many years, you must have seen the sport grow considerably, especially over the last few years, and then indeed the confidence of people that are taking part as well.
Yeah, I suppose since the sport has started, the one term that has been thrown around really loosely has been that this is the fastest growing water sport. And in the 13 years that I've been involved, I hear it every single year, and it's still growing and it's still evolving. What started off as just maybe one discipline on one particular type of board has gone off in so many different tangents and so many different directions. And I think that's what's making the sport as popular as it is that there's so much variety. Whether you're looking for a real sort of adrenaline rush, riding waves or riding foil boards, or you're just looking for something really relaxing, something that you can use for health and fitness. There is an avenue and there is a discipline within the sport for that. I mean, to look at the categories or the age ranges that the sport caters for, it caters for everybody. If you can stand up, you can paddleboard. If you're able to throw your legs over the side of the bed in the morning and stand up, there's no reason why you can't go paddleboarding. My own kids have been on paddleboard since they were babies, since they were old enough to be allowed to go in the water. I've had them sitting on the front of my boards where I've been paddling. I see lots of families doing that now. I see lots of parents putting their kids on the boards. They do the paddling, they do the navigating, and the kids are experiencing what it's like to be on the water. And very quickly, they want to stand and they want to paddle. And you've got that from that very, very young age all the way through to, the oldest I've had is a 75-year-old man. And while he found it difficult to get to his feet, once he was on his feet, he was flying around the harbor. And it's incredible to see people of all ranges, all sizes. You don't have to be super fit. You don't have to be a very competent water person. Every class I take, there's a student comes to me and says, Paul, it's important that you know I've got a major phobia of the water, or I've got a fear of the water. But yet they're prepared to come out and have a go at stand-up paddleboarding. You know, it caters for everybody. It really does. It's just a pity where we lie, latitude, longitude wise, with our climate. It's just a pity we're not a little bit closer to the equator, where we've got warmer weather and warmer water, and then maybe we'd have a season all year round.
What we're going to do.
Thanks, Paul.
Sorry, Camilla, I interrupted. We're going to look at photos of Paul now. Hedda, if you'd like to bring up Paul's first batch of photos, that'd be great.
Yeah, they're on the way now. Can you see that?
Yep, great. So Paul, tell us, give us a comment or two as we go through your first little batch of slideshows.
So we could make it really, really short, Aidan, and just, this is what it's all about for me. We could just look at this photograph and then call it a day. This is what it's all about for me. Eoin talked about, what SUP brings for him, being that meditative state on the water, that touring experience. For me, it's riding waves. It's the adrenaline rush. It's the energy that a wave like this provides me to be able to dance on the water. This shot here is taken a couple of years ago. It's taken in Costa da Caparica, outside Lisbon in Portugal. And I was at a dealers meeting for that board that I'm riding there for Sonova, with all the dealers from around Europe. And our board meetings in the SUP and the surf industry, this is our board meetings. We don't sit in offices. We get out and we ride waves, and we talk lots of surf talk afterwards. So that's in Portugal a couple of years ago. Nice warm water, nice clean waves. And yeah, that's certainly a photograph that I really cherish. It sums it all up for me. No, fancy that. Another photograph in a wave. You asked me earlier on, Aidan, where my favorite place in the country was to paddle. It's probably my favorite place in the world to paddle, to be honest. It's Southwest Kerry. We've got a bit of an unwritten rule within surf communities that you never talk about locations of waves. So I don't mind giving away the Portugal one, but I can't give away the location of this, or I'd never be welcome in these waves again. But it's Southwest Kerry. I don't know how many people will have recognized the rocks in the background. That's the Skellig rocks. So this is a beautiful place. I surf here a couple of times a year. Nearly every trip I have dolphins in the water with me. The Skelligs is a backdrop. In the evening time when the sun sets, it sets behind those rocks, and there's no more beautiful place in the world than that beach. Okay, that's me doing my thing. It's me talking the talk. This is on Dollymount Beach. I'm not sure what year it was. The event was the Battle for the Bay, which takes place every year on Dollymount. This would have been either a distance race or a technical race. I'm the event director at that event for all the paddleboarding activities. Safety is crucial in everything that we do. You can see a safety boat in the background. That boat will be on the water, normally a jet ski or two, to keep an eye on the racers. And this is the safety brief beforehand. This is where the rules for the race are explained. It's where the course is described, and we go through it in great detail. And it's where any questions that the athletes have regarding that particular race, that they get to ask that. So this is a really important time. It's normally quite a nerve-wracking time for the individuals that are taking part. And it's a really important time for me to get my message across, to make sure things are done correctly and things are done safely, and we can all have a bit of a laugh and enjoy the activities that evening afterwards. This is a buddy of mine, Francois. Francois is he's the magician around a lot of the beach activities that happen in Ireland. He is the one who makes Battle for the Bay happen on Dollymount every year, except when we've got crazy viruses. But for those that don't know, Battle for the Bay, it's the largest beach festival that takes place in Ireland on Dollymount Beach. I think probably the biggest attendance we had was 90,000 people over 2 days, and that was about five years ago. It was a really hot weekend. It takes place the last weekend of May every year. So Francois he's known as the magician. He makes things happen. He runs another event over in Achill called Battle for the Lake. And when I see Francois' name coming up on my phone, and I hear Francois, start the call with, "Paulie, I have an idea," I run for cover, because he comes up with some crazy ideas, but in fairness, he pulls them off. He pulls them off all the time. So he's a guy that creates a platform for us to run a lot of our paddleboarding events in Ireland. This is work. This is me away running an instructor's workshop. I was away for over a week in Portorož in Slovenia, running level 1 and a level 2 instructor's course, and running some water rescue awards. This group of people were I don't know, it was one of the workshops I'll never forget. It was my favorite workshop that I've ever ran, training instructors. The weather was fantastic, but the people were super, absolutely super. 3 of these people are very, very close friends of mine since this workshop. As a matter of fact, the guy on the right-hand side with the black visor, he's a double Olympian medal winner in kayaking. And I remember flying to Slovenia via Charles de Gaulle, and I remember taking out the paperwork. I do everything last minute. I remember taking out the paperwork to read and see who the candidates were on my course, and reading that this guy was on my course, and this guy had a gold and a silver Olympic medal for kayaking, and absolutely planking it. Here was a guy who knew so much more about paddles than I ever would. Our sport was so new, and having him on a course was it was a hell of an experience, and lucky for me, he was a very, very nice guy, and not only did I teach them lots, but we all learned so much from him as well. Since I ran that workshop, I think it was about 8 years ago, I have gone back to Slovenia every year. I've brought groups back there. I've brought 3 or 4 groups from Ireland on safaris, sub-safaris. The girl on the left-hand side in the front, down on her knees, Natasha has a sub-school in Ljubljana, and Natasha and I are bringing groups out there, and she's become a very, very good friend. But that's probably one of my favorite workshops that I've ever ran. This is back on Dollymount Beach, looking nice and festive and nice and colorful. This is the preparation time before an event called the Survivor Race. And it really is worthy of that name, Survivor Race. It's short sprints. You can see there's traffic cones in the background. It's short sprints on the beach. If you look behind all of the athletes, you can see the paddles stuck in the sand. There's a sprint from the traffic cones away from the water's edge to grab a paddle, to turn around, sprint down to your board, grab your board, sprint maybe 100 meters on your board paddling out, and turn and race back. The last 2 people are eliminated, and that race keeps running and running and running, maybe 7 or 8 heats of that race back to back with a 2-3 minute break. There's lots of people on their knees, there's vomiting, this is hardcore. This is probably one of the most difficult races to participate in. and it's probably one of the most entertaining to watch because it happens right in front of your eyes. They're not disappearing off for kilometers. They're right in front of you on the beach. It's a hell of a race, and I know there's a few people there watching tonight who have participated in this, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a hell of a race. It's my favorite race format to run. I don't like doing it, but I don't mind running it. This is Achill Island, and this is part of Battle for the Lake. I ran the Irish Surf Classic there a couple of years ago. Patrick, who was one of your Ocean Heroes on last weekend, Patrick took this photograph, and it's a young lady, Mia Hamilton from Enniscrone, competing in one of the ladies' heats. It may even be the final, I'm not sure. And in surf events, the different athletes wear different color bibs, and they're scored on their waves. But we do have rules, and one of the rules is that only one person is allowed to ride each wave. Obviously, that's a safety thing. And on the left-hand side here, we have Linda, who's a very well-known paddleboarder from Dublin, and Linda is very eager to be part of this wave as well. But decides that she better bail, and did just in time. I think Mia lived to tell the tale, but it's a fantastic capture by Patrick. Mia is in a superb position in that wave. She's almost getting barreled, and I'm not sure, was she aware of how close she was to having Linda actually land in on top of her head here. But great camera work by Patrick to capture that moment. Well done, Patrick. Back on Dollymount, there's another race format. You know, we have lots of serious races. Heading off and paddling 22 kilometers in a distance race is hard work, and it's not everybody's idea of fun. The Survivor race, it's great for spectators, it's great for me to watch, but again, it's a tough race. This one is a real fun race. It brings everybody into the event. When we run this at Battle for the Bay, we normally end up having kiters take part. They don't have to be very good paddleboarders at all, and teams have to be made up of 3 guys and 1 lady, and we are all on the one board. So it's a 17-foot inflatable board where you have to try and keep your 4 people on the board and race on that board. Dollymount has a little bit of swell. It's not easy. I can tell you it's not easy. This board is pretty much the same width as a normal SUP board. It's just that little bit longer. And if you look at all those legs and you look at all those knees, I can guarantee you every set of legs there is like jelly. Knees really, really shaking. It's again, just a fun event, and this is what it's about. Even though I talk a lot about competition and I talk a lot about events, it's fun. You know, it's about having the crack, and it's about having stories to be able to tell that evening while we're sitting in the pub over a pint or a glass of wine. Another competition picture. This is Euro SUP. This is the European Championships in Peniche in Portugal. The European Championships, we always manage to get a team there. Unfortunately, unlike a lot of the bigger countries, it's all funded. People have to take their own time off work, come up with the money themselves to be able to put themselves there or get themselves to represent their country. A team will normally be made up of guys and girls, racers, whether it's technical racers or distance racers, and surfers. So a good mix of athletes. This particular picture has a sort of a glass jar sitting on the table in the front. And this is part of the opening ceremony at every European Championships and every World Championships, where each team is called up and they bring a small container of sand from their local beach. And they pour that little container of sand into the big jar. And at the end of the opening ceremony, you have maybe 24, 34 nations who've brought their piece of sand. And that big jar takes place for the whole week or 10 days of the contest. And it's incredible to watch, or incredible to look at. You've got, you know, really clear sand, really fine sand, really thick sand, really dark sand. It's just a nice little ceremony, or nice little token that takes place as part of the opening ceremony at all these contests. This is another trip away, another instructor's course. This was a really interesting one. This is a lake in a place called Trakai, and anyone that's into rowing will recognize this location. A lot of world championships and European championship rowing competitions take place here. And we were working out at the Olympic Training Center, the Lithuanian Olympic Training Center here, running this workshop. The guy on the left is from Latvia. Next guy to him beside me is Miguel. Miguel is from the Amazon, and Miguel is probably the most interesting instructor candidate I've ever had on a course. As part of our instructor training, we do a lot on safety and we do a lot on risk assessments, and Miguel's risk assessment for where he operates and where he runs his school on the Amazon was just fascinating. You know, there was the talk of anaconda and piranha, and it was just absolutely incredible. And you can see his arm going over the shoulder, his right arm going over the shoulder, and you can see it's covered in tattoos. His whole body, bar his face, is covered. It's a tapestry of tattoos of the animals and the wildlife in the Amazon jungle. He was one of the most interesting people I ever met on a course, and again has become a really good friend. And someday I'm going to go paddle on the Amazon with him at his school. So this was an instructor workshop in Lithuania.
Super. Thanks so much for that, Paul. Some of those photos are fascinating. You know, you were talking earlier there about maybe nice to have a slightly warmer climate, but there might be some benefits to having the colder waters as well with that last photo. So I have a question for both of you now. Are there any particular challenges with your sport that you want to briefly talk about? So Eoin, I might go to you first, if that's okay.
Well, thankfully, it's not anacondas and it's not piranhas in Ireland anyway. I think for me, I think one of the biggest challenges that our sport faces at the moment is it's around safety, and it's around safety as a result of how Paul mentioned the word fast growing is, and in particular over the last 12 months, given the amount of free time people have found themselves with lockdowns and things like that. I've kind of commonly referred to last year as the Chinese year, the SUP, because of the SUPs that landed in the country from everywhere. And they were being sold, you know, over the counter very easily, very accessibly. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that means more people get involved with the sport. But they weren't necessarily being accompanied by the safety side of things. And so, you know, we were seeing on the water more people getting on boards, but maybe not taking all the safety precautions that they should. And it's not that, you know, I'm a fuddy-duddy that doesn't want to have fun on the water or anything like that, but, you know, safety has to be paramount. Safety has to be priority, because then fun comes second, and you're guaranteed to have fun if you're safe on the water. So for me, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face at the moment is how do we make sure that everyone who gets aboard, where possible, understands what they should be doing from a safety perspective, making sure that they have a working leash, good quality board, a PFD, a means of communication, and that they let people know where they're going and when they expect to be back, and you know, checking the weather forecast as well. So for me, that's the key thing. And if we can find a way of, you know, helping retailers to pass on that message, it'd be fantastic.
Super. Thanks, Eoin. And Paul, I'll pass the same question over to you.
Yeah, I think Eoin has really covered it there. It is about just trying to make sure that what is happening on the water is best practice. It's fantastic to see price point equipment available for people. It's, you know, if the equipment remains expensive and remains specialized and exclusive, it's not going to allow as many people get on the water. So price point equipment is fantastic, and I have no problem with it, but it's just where possible to try and get a message across of what is best practice. It doesn't have to be a lesson. Obviously, a lesson is the best approach, but even just asking advice, asking somebody, you know, is it safe to go here? Do you know these waters? You know, that is the way forward. A big challenge for operators right now is working around COVID. So we had a bumper season last year. We probably, all of the schools around the country probably put more people on the water than they have in the last 5 years. And that's fantastic. But it's taken an awful lot of hard work to make sure that work practices are safe, that staff are being kept safe, that clients are being kept safe. And the big thing we're struggling with right now is that, you know, while everybody knows that outdoors is the place to be, and you know, mental health is just so important, it's even more difficult as an operator and for schools to be able to operate. There's no funding, there's nobody helping schools remain open. There's going to be less schools participating or opening their doors this season than last year, because they've gone out of business. They can't, it's not sustainable. They can't keep their schools open. Insurance costs are going up. And even insurance itself has become a problem in that a lot of insurance companies with Brexit have pulled out of Ireland, and some adventure centres, some water sports centres, some sub-schools can't even get insurance anymore. So there's certainly lots and lots of challenges, but hopefully we will be able to have a busy season and put lots of people on the water again this year.
Well, I just want to say, you know, you mentioned about the community, and also you mentioned about Patrick's photography. Of course, he was a real star of last week's, you know, windsurfing, kite surfing, and we will see his name come up on quite a few photos. So I think Patrick's listening as well. So it's great to have him part of it and see his photos, more photos. But I'm going to direct a question now to Eoin. You've set up, and this is on the community element here, you've set up and manage an online forum called SUP Stoked, which connects you and keeps you on the pulse of the SUP community. How does this help you with your own pursuit of qualifications of the sport, Eoin?
Well, I think where it came from initially was back in 2018. I saw all these suppers out on the water. I was one of them. And I just didn't see a way of us all connecting, a way of us all getting in touch. You know, it's, for me, there's times when it's lovely to sup on your own, but there's also times when it's lovely to sup in company. And so at the time, I just set up a simple WhatsApp thread. And that grew and grew quite successfully over the last couple of years, where people would shout if they were going for a session, and if anyone was local, they would come and join them. But it was very much just Dublin based, Dublin centric, and I was conscious of that. And it was also hard to keep track of what was going on in the thread. I'm sure we're all part of WhatsApp groups where notification after notification comes in and you just can't figure out what's going on. So recently, we moved the platform, I suppose, over to another provider called Discord, and renamed it to SUP Stoked. And so the idea behind it is, like I think what Paul said about locations there, one of the things is if you're planning to go out somewhere, you can ask for advice on a particular location, or maybe if there's anyone local to there that might want to join you. You can get gear advice. If you're planning on buying a new board, you can get advice on that. There's various different channels within it. And for me, I think what's great is it helps me to keep myself up to speed on what's going on in the industry so that I can offer advice. I also recently went and did my first part of my instructorship with Paul. It was a fantastic experience. I'd recommend it to anyone to go and start doing your instructor courses if you have a keen interest in SUP, and Paul will be one of the people that will help you along with that very well. And so for me, it's a great way of kind of using that knowledge to help others. I often say it's giving the gift of access to water to people who don't think they can have it, or don't think they can get on the water, and to make them and help them realize that, a bit like what Paul said earlier on, no matter your shape, your size, your ability, non-ability, whatever it is, there's a place for you on the water, and if you want it, and it will bring so much to your life that you won't realize.
That's brilliant, Eoin. Thank you for that. And I think it's time we should see some photos now of Eoin's. So let's see them.
So this first one is, this is back in, I'm going to say about 2016, I would think. So when I first started SUP, and it's my home spot. It's Borough Beach, out between Sutton and Howth on the north side of Dublin. That's Ireland's Eye in the background there. And this, for me, is what really got me hooked onto SUP. It's being able, I think I mentioned at the start there, that idea of having a 360 view when you're standing on the water. And to see that kind of a sunrise was just special. I'm very lucky that where I live, we get the sunrise and the sunset throughout the day. And when you get on the water nice and early and you can see the sun coming up behind the island, it's a great way to start the day. And yeah, so we have some special moments like that on the water. So that one for me is really what got me hooked on the sport. This particular one is not long after that. It would have been somewhere around the summer of 2016. And I won't give away the location. A bit like Paul, you know, sometimes he keeps some locations a secret. You know, you don't want them to be overtaken with people. But this is a lake very close to Wexford town, actually, about 5 or 10 minutes drive outside of Wexford town. And this proves the great thing about inflatable SUP boards. So you have hard boards and you have inflatable boards, and you can see on my back there in the center of the image, I have a bag on my back, and that's carrying my board. And we had to park about 10 minutes walk from where this photo was taken, at the start of a forest. And we knew there was a lake somewhere up the path, but we weren't quite sure where. And so the boards went on our backs and we started walking, and we eventually, you can just start to see the lake coming into view there down towards the end of the path. And we had a magical SUP in among very high kind of rock formations that you can see there, and the beautiful trees under the blue skies. So, you know, it would have been a bit harder to do that if we'd had a hardboard. So it kind of proved to me the beauty of the inflatable boards. This one that's actually Paul on the left hand side there. This would have been one of the first canal SUPs that I would have done. So that's the Grand Canal, and Paul beside me there. There's a lovely stretch of canal starting down to Hazel Hatch, and it's 3 kilometers down, 3 kilometers back, and it's a lovely canal paddle to do. It's reasonably safe. You do get a bit of wind sometimes funneling down the canal, which can make it interesting. But in general, it's a very simple, easy paddle to do. And it was around probably around the time I was really only getting to know Paul. Since then, he's become a very good friend, which I'm very thankful for. At the time, I was also demoing a board that day, that particular one, which is the one I'm on there. It's a slightly longer touring board compared to the normal standard boards that people would have. It's a couple of feet longer, so you can carry some more gear on it, and it's a bit more stable in the water. And to this day, I still have that board. So that board was bought in 2017 and still goes strong. And so it proves also that if you spend a bit of extra money on your board, you'll get quality. So yeah, that was what that was. This is in the city centre, actually, in Dublin, and in the background there is the Samuel Beckett Bridge, the bridge that people might know as it's shaped like a harp, and that's a very good friend of mine, another instructor, Sinead Hegarty there to the right, and we had paddled down the Liffey, and just pure coincidence that there was a photographer. There always tends to be photographers down around that bridge, because they get some lovely vistas, the convention center and the bridge and things like that. And he shouted down to us. He was fascinated to see us coming down the river, and so he shouted down to us. He says, "Oh, I want to get a photo of you," and whatever, and that was great. So he took a few photos, and we were kind of shouting up to him, and he was shouting down to us. It was low tide at the time, so it was a bit of a shout. But he managed to get my email address, and lo and behold, a couple of days later, these images appeared in my email. So it was a kind of a fluke chance, but it was nice to get some images of going down the city centre. Again, that's one of the, if I talk about perspective for a second, one of the great things about paddling down through the Liffey, down the city centre, is that you're forced to look up past the walls alongside you. And when you look up, you actually end up looking up at the tops of the buildings. And the tops of the buildings aren't things you normally see. And you're normally at road level just walking around. But the architecture and the art and some of the buildings, they're incredible when you look up. So again, that's something that SUP brings, is the ability to see the world in a different way. This is back to my home spot, and this is the other side of Ireland's Eye. So if you've ever been to Howth and you've maybe walked along the pier, you'll have seen Ireland's Eye and the kind of the green rolling field, if you want to call it that, but it's variations of gorse and stuff like that coming up to the top of the island. And you have the Martello Tower on the left hand side, you have a small ruin of a church on the right. But most people don't realize that on the back side of the island is what looks like Jurassic Park. That's how I refer to it. It is all these rock formations and very steep high cliffs that you just don't expect, and you can see the variations in color there. And that's a particular cave that's on the back side of the island, the north side of the island, and you can go into that cave, but you should be careful sometimes because there's a seal colony that live on the island and in and around it. And during the season where they're having their pups, sometimes one or two of the mothers can take over that cave as a little nursery. And so if you find yourself heading up towards the cave and there's one or two of the larger seals at the front, you don't dare go in because you know that there's going to be a few pups down the back of it, and you might find yourself in trouble. But on occasions, those pups have been a little bit older, and you might see a few photos floating around on the internet of some of my friends who would have been on boards at the cave there, and the seals jump up on the boards and join them. So they're paddling around with a baby seal on their board, which makes life interesting. This is back to the same spot as that first photo I showed you, and that again is Ireland's Eye in the background. But this was a very, very special paddle. This was one of the first times that I found out the enjoyment of having others on the water. It was early on in my journey in SUP, and I decided to try and arrange a dawn chorus paddle. So the dawn chorus happens, I think, in May or June of each year, and I said, look, come on, we'll get a group of people together. So we corralled everyone on the beach. I think it was about 4:30 in the morning on Burrow Beach, and it was still dark, but we all started pumping, and we were on the water by 5, and the sun started to come up not long after that. You can see it coming up behind the island there, and it was glassy on the water to the point where there was a very small swell on the water, but because it was so glassy and there was no wind, it was very hard to see the swell. So it was very hard to maintain your balance that morning. Not only was it just because it was early in the morning, but you were being thrown by this swell that was on the water. But you can see how magical that was to be on the water at 5 o'clock. Is, you know, not many people are doing that, so it's a kind of a special thing to do in the first place. But to have a sunrise like that, and also to have some plane trails, you can see the trails of the planes in the sky there, just made it very special. And to share that with other people was epic. And this is the other side of having fun on the water. This is on the Royal Canal this time. And you can see actually Francois is in the background there. So this was a trip organized through his company, Pure Magic. And it was in conjunction with the lady you can see on the barge there. That's a lady called Jenny Wren. And she runs Royal Canal boat trips on her barge. And so what we had arranged was that we would get in at one of the locks up towards the city centre end of the canal, and we paddled down probably about 3 or 4 kilometres, and we met Jenny on her barge as she was coming the other way. And we all got off our boards, we put the boards up on top of the barge, and we went inside, and we ended up having a few beers and a bit of food. And Jenny, it was great, she played guitar, and it was just super, super fun. And you can see, I think the great thing, what I love about that photo was the smile on everyone's face, and I think, you know, that's one of the things that SUP does, is it just brings you into a place where you get so distracted. You could have anything going on in the world, and you jump on a board onto the water and you get distracted for a little while. So it was a nice day. That's just a fun photo. I like the fact that it's me on my board with nothing else around me, only water. And that's, you know, where you can sometimes be happy in company, sometimes you can be happy on your own. Now, I wasn't exactly on my own on that day. That was taken by a friend of mine who was also on another board flying a drone, and he put it up and took that photo. Again, as I say, I just love it for, it's a slightly unique photo and shows the love of being on the water by myself sometimes. And this one then is up in Achill. This is at Battle for the Bay, I'm going to say 2018, I think. And this one is interesting because So you have SUP, which is done generally, in low wind conditions. It's something that you wouldn't really go out in anything over 10 to 12 knots unless you're very proficient. But this particular day, there was kite surfing going on as well. And so if you SUP, you might be a kiter in another life. So if it's windy, you go out in the kites, and if it's less windy, you go out on the boards. But this particular day, the two sports joined forces. So that's me on the board, as you can see, trying to maintain my balance, because the guy on the back is a guy called Kevin Langeray, and he is one of the world's most proficient kite surfers. He's a very, very talented kite surfer, and he comes from Holland, and he was over for the weekend for Battle for the Bay. And I was in a race that day, one of the races that Paul had arranged, and halfway through, it wasn't going very well for me, so I just said, I threw in the towel, as they say, and I started going off down the lake in another direction. And next thing, Kevin came up behind me on his kite and said, did I need a lift? So he jumped up onto the board, and using the power of his kite, you can see we got some speed going in the board there. If you look at the back of it, there's a nice bit of wash coming off the back, and we had a bit of fun. So the two sports came together for a moment in time, and it was a bit of crack. And so this then introduces my other love of water, which is kite surfing. I know that was something we focused on last week, and for me it's very special because it brings the other side of water into my life, the power of the water and the power of the wind. So sometimes it's nice to go out and just have a lazy sup and just be nice and chilled out on the water, but sometimes it's nice to get out and really get wet and feel the power and force of the wind and the water in your face, and blow every one of those cobwebs and every one of those worries that you have in your head out, and just let it go for a while. And so again, that's Ireland's Eye in the background, but it's from a very different perspective. That's actually Portmarnock Beach, and that was last week. That was last Tuesday. The photo was taken in the middle of the high winds that we had last week. So there was no supping, but there was lots of kiting.
Thank you, Eoin, so much for that fantastic photos. Look, we've got another round of photos for both Paul and Eoin, but just a quick couple of questions. Question for both. If you can be brief on this, is there someone you particularly looked up to with the sport? How about if we say Paul first? Is there someone that you've particularly been inspired with the sport?
Yeah, obviously in my professional career, there's been a lot of individuals who've taught me an awful lot. Surf was my background. I didn't know a whole lot about paddles, and when I started paddling first, the paddle was quite alien. But there's one individual. He's in the US. It's a guy called Rick Weeks. And I think a lot of people will have come across Rick. Rick is 72 years of age. And those waves I showed you, me surfing Eoin, or that we looked at me in earlier on, Rick is on a daily basis putting himself in waves like that. He's an absolute legend. This guy, he's got the heart of a 20-year-old. And he's on the water surfing every single day. And he's my idol, because when I'm 72 years of age, I will be doing exactly what he's doing. I certainly have no intentions of slowing down or easing off for a long time. That's another 20 years away, but it's so much to look forward to when you see guys his age doing that. You just know, well, it's possible. I can do it, no problem.
Great. And Eoin, is there someone that's jumps out to you as someone who's inspired you?
Well, I didn't come from a surfing background. I didn't come from a SUP background. So I think the first people that I would have looked up to would have actually been Paul, because he was one of the ones that introduced me to the water. He was one of the ones that started giving me advice when I first came along. And to this day, he still offers advice when I need it. and that can be for various different reasons. And sometimes it's advice that maybe I don't ask for as well, which is great. So he keeps me on my toes. And yeah, no, for me, Paul, and also I think as well, Paul mentioned it. It's, you know, he's had a 75-year-old on the water. Throughout, you know, the bit of instructing that I've done, I've come across some older people as well, and some very young kids maybe with fears of the water. When you see what they can do, or when you see what you can challenge them to do and what they end up doing, that can be hugely inspiring. You can come off the water after a class with someone like that, and my God, you'd want to stay in SUP for the rest of your life as a result. So that can be hugely inspiring.
I think, Eoin, you've already alluded to the fact that Paul has been a big inspiration. So it was a little bit of a double-edged sword question, thinking, is he going to pick someone else?
Thanks, Eoin.
Anyway, so Camilla, you would like to ask a question now for Paul.
Yeah, so Paul, just a quick question for you. So you've travelled extensively and competed at the highest world championships in recent years. So do you practice all disciplines like long distance, surf, technical, sprint, or do you have like a certain draw for one over the rest?
My competition days are over, Camilla. I'm not all that keen in going out and race and distance races or technical races. The beauty of the sport is no matter where you are, what you're doing, there's a different discipline that you can take part in. So I can jump on the Grand Canal race board and I can go and I can do a really good workout. I can do a 6K time trial or whatever. Or I can grab my surfboard and I can go, and you know, every time I surf, I still put myself in that competition scene where, okay, you've got 5 minutes, you need one last wave, a good score on this wave to win your heat, and putting that pressure. So even though the competition days are gone, I'm still competitive. I'm just waiting for the day that the over 50s or the veteran or whatever comes into play. I mean, when I went to the World Championships, I was the oldest or one of the oldest athletes then, you know. So yeah, I'm going to wait for the veterans, and we'll have a crack again then maybe.
That might inspire you to set up your own little competition there.
Exactly, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I think, sorry, go on.
The problem is when you're running the competition, you don't get to take yourself. In the early days, you used to be able, but not anymore. You know, it gets a little bit serious, or there's always one or two people who are very competitive and very serious, and it's very hard to be event director and compete. I did it for a little while, but it's got to be one or the other now, you know.
Yeah. Okay, Hedda, I think you might have another batch of photos for us there.
That's a photo, I suppose, just showing that it's not all serious. Most of what happens within SUP activities and within the SUP community is about having fun, about having the crack. A lot of people will know Trevor O'Rourke. That's Trevor in that picture, and Trevor was competing. He was in a contest that day, and Trevor will always do something very entertaining or something very special to attract the attention of the judges. That was in County Sligo at the Irish SUP Surf Classic a couple of years ago. That's a fun shot. That might be Patrick's shot. It is Patrick's shot. Another one of Patrick's shots. So I've got to thank Patrick for all his photos, and Owen's partner Carolina gave me a lot of photographs as well. So thank you to those guys. That's the first ever World Championships. It was in Lima in Peru, and the first stand-up paddleboarding championships. That was I was a member of the Irish team out there. You've got Katie. No, that's not Katie. We got Ed and Dave and Finn, and that's the president of the International Surfing Association with us there at the opening ceremony in Peru. With all of the events I do, I try to offer prizes that are really, really special. I've got a good buddy who for years was hand making wooden paddle trophies for the winners of the contests I ran, and poor Dave, his heart was broken making paddles for me, hours and hours and hours of work went into providing paddles. And this was a set of prizes. Dave didn't make these, unfortunately. These were done for the Battle for the Bay. The Dublin Bay Sup Classic is what the sup part of that contest is called. And at the end of the weekend, we crown a Lord and a Lady of the Bay. So for every event that you take part in, you score points. And this was the special award for the Lord and Lady. And you can see that they've got a little QR chip in the middle of the trophy. And when you scan that, it brings you to Dollymount as the location on Google Maps. So just some nice trophies that were used at an event. I think we saw that photograph earlier on, just a slightly different angle. It's probably not the canal at its best. You can see that there's a lot of weed growing, and the fact that we're in shorts and t-shirts will suggest that it's obviously summertime or fairly close to summertime. I actually remember that paddle quite well because we got eaten alive by horseflies. We were really pushing it. I think that time of the year, it's time to get off the canal. The canal gets a lot of flies, gets a lot of biting insects, and there's an awful lot of weed. I find the canal is at its best during the wintertime when the seas are really big and wild. You can get on the canal, you have none of that weed growth, and you've got lots of shelter along the canal from the trees and the hedges along the side. The canals get a really bad rap in Dublin. I suppose the city centre canals aren't all that clean, but they're a superb place to go paddling. I really love going on the canals, and certainly during the lockdowns, I've got a canal very close to me, and I've got to know it very well. That's the Clontarf Bats, and a couple of years ago, Francois contacted me and he said, "Paulie, I've got an idea." So his idea was bringing sup racing to the swimming pool in the Clontarf Bats. For anyone that hasn't been there, it's got a nice little restaurant area, it's got a nice open bar, and then on the lower level you've got pool deck and you've got the swimming pool itself. So this was the opening ceremony. It was a Friday night for a Battle for the Bay, and we ran sprint races. You can see on the left-hand side of the pool, you can see two little red dots. They would have been the turning boys. It was a very exciting race. It's the first time we've done anything like this in Ireland. Pool racing has become really big. It's become big at the Paris Boat Show and Dusseldorf and places like that, always indoors. So we said, let's do something different. Let's do it outdoors. Let's do it down in Clontarf, new pool that they've built. And it was a very successful event. It was just, again, people able to sit, have a beer, have a burger, and watch the event. It was quite user friendly as events go. That was last year, I think. Yeah, it was November. It was November of last year. Sorry, the year before, in Lagos near Sagres in Portugal, and it was a train retreat. So all of the Academy of Surf Instructors, the company that I work for, all of the trainers from around Europe came together for some presentations, and obviously a couple of board meetings where we got out and paddled through some fantastic caves. So lots of instructors from all over Europe, and actually a couple from the US came and joined us as well. It was a beautiful place to paddle if anyone's ever looking for a relatively accessible holiday, so we can ever go on holidays again. Yeah, Sagres in Portugal, some super paddling along the coastline and through the caves. This is one of the rare times I got to compete in an event. I don't run this event. This event is called Connacht Battle for the Paddle, and it's run by a very good friend of mine, Mikey Hamilton in Enniscrone. And this is a wave local to Enniscrone. I'm not giving anything away, Mikey, don't worry. And it's a beautiful wave. It's probably one of my favorite waves. It's not in my favorite county, but it's probably one of my favorite waves in the country. This wave just runs and runs and runs and runs. And as a surfer, what you're trying to do on this wave is stay as close to the pocket as you can. So the pocket is on the right-hand side where you see all of the white water. That's where the maximum amount of energy is in the wave. And you don't want to overrun that. You don't want to go too far down the line because you're going to lose energy. But you can see that this wave is it's quite powerful, and it's starting to come over my head. So this is one of those times when you do need to run down along to get out of the way. And you'll surf the wave from the top to the bottom, top to the bottom, top to the bottom, maybe do some turns and some cutbacks. This wave is so long that you're exhausted after it. It runs for easily 200, 250 meters. It's quite a special wave, and this was the final of the surf contest. I think it was 3 years ago. Yeah, a really special photo and a really nice wave. It was a good day. This is your favorite one, Aidan. This is the magic shot. We talked earlier on, Camilla, about different disciplines within the sport. In the last 2 years, this discipline started to emerge, and it's called sup foiling or stand paddle foiling. So what's happening here is you've got a hydrofoil attached to the bottom of your sup board. So what you can see in that picture is a aluminium mast. That mast is about 1 meter long, and on the bottom of that mast you've got a hydrofoil. You've got a carbon fiber wing. So you've got a small airplane, big front wing, small back wing, and you take off on the wave on the board like normal, flat on the water. You put weight on the back foot, which lifts the nose of the board, but also lifts the front of your hydrofoil. And it rises up. Once it reaches the desired height, you put weight on the front foot and level out just like an airplane would. And now surf the wave with on a hydrofoil. And this has become a real passion of mine. And just in the last 12 months, this has evolved even further to now doing away with the paddle and putting a hand wing. So it's like a kite, but with no strings. And you're holding the wing over your head, and you're creating all of the momentum and all of the speed from the wing, getting up on foil and surfing the foil or surfing the board on foil. And when you're finished, powering up your wing and using it to bring you back out to catch more waves. And some of you have probably seen this. Francois from Pure Magic is doing an awful lot of it around Clontarf and around the south side, down around Poolbeg and Sea Point. And you'll see us doing it out around Port Marnock, Malahide. So this is going to become really big, foiling and wing foiling. It's probably the newest area of stand-up paddleboarding. This is a photograph I didn't even realize I had until I went looking for photos last week. And this is the very first stand-up paddleboarding lesson I ran. It is probably the first stand-up paddleboarding lesson that took place in the country. We were on big boards, we had leashes on, with no buoyancy aids. There was no rules or regulations at this stage. It was a free-for-all. My education background as a phys ed teacher, and my background as a master scuba diver trainer gave me the courage and the know-it-all to be able to draw up my own curriculum of stand-up paddleboarding courses. We operated for about 8 months with no insurance because we couldn't get insurance. Nobody knew what it was we were doing. And I remember a friend of mine who was an insurance broker organizing a session for me where I got to take some people in the insurance industry out to see what the level of risk was that was involved in the sport. And they managed to come up with an insurance package for us. There was no instructor training. There was no such thing as instructors. And it wasn't for probably another 2 years that actually education or sub-education became part of the whole process. But that's Sandcove, down near the 40 foot, near Dunleary, a beautiful place for paddling, as you can see there. So yeah, one of the early paddleboarding photos. I don't even know who those people are, really, to be honest. But it was, yeah, it's a blast from the past. These photos really, I should have arranged these so that we're at the start. This is way back as well, I suppose. My real passion when it comes to SUP education is teaching kids. I work in a primary school. I'm a PE teacher, and all of the boys in my school know that I'm passionate about stand-up paddleboarding. Every year for June and July, I'll run SUP camps for them. Myself and my daughter run them, and these guys have become as passionate for SUP as I am. You know, parents contact me or they come and, you know, say, oh, Mr. Byrne, I want to book Johnny into a camp again next week. I don't know what it is about stand-up paddleboarding. He won't get off the couch at any other stage, but he wants to do your camps all the time. You know, it brings it back to what Eoin would have discussed there earlier on, that the connection with the water, the blue mind, it has an incredible impact on kids. Kids love being out there. You know, sometimes I will have 12, 15 people in my group with a couple of instructors, and we paddle around like a SUP train. So it's like carriages on a train, one board behind the other. Not a word. We could paddle for 20 minutes, half an hour, and there's not a word being said among these kids. They're focusing on not bumping the board in front, not slowing down. It really is. It's very rewarding to work with kids and see kids get so much out of this. Our camps are about SUP education, but also teaching them about awareness, teaching them about marine life, teaching them about the environment and best practice around the environment. And what really excites me is out of those 5 guys, 3 of them have gone on and become instructors with me, and help me in my camps. And you know that you're doing something right when you have kids at 8, 9, 10 years of age, you know, coming on and becoming instructors then later down the road. So Dunleary Harbour. Owen's partner Carolina took this photograph. I think it was just before Christmas, Owen, was it? It was a trip from Howth out to Ireland's Eye. I wasn't aware that she'd taken photographs, and after the trip she sent me a number of photographs, and something really apparent hit me, and it was these synchronized images of myself and my daughter on the water. There was a number of them. There was about 5 or 6 of them. And this one in particular, where we're at the exact same stage or phase of our paddle stroke. And all of the other photos were very much the same. And I think it's very symbolic for me to where I am with my relationship with my daughter right now. She's become a SUP instructor. She got a scholarship and she's done her level 1 or level 2 instructorship. She's become passionate about SUP surfing. She wants to learn to foil. She's now given me advice in the van on the way back from the harbour and on the way back from lessons about how I could do things better and what I didn't do so well. And now she has asked me a number of times to talk to my boss, Tanya, within the Academy of Surf Instructors in Bondi, about the possibility of her becoming a trainer in the future. And it just, it's really special. It really brings it all home for me that SUP and paddleboarding has had such an impact on her life that she wants to actually go down the same road I've gone. And this photograph means an awful lot to me. Thanks for those, Caroline. And there they are again. And again, Camilla, we talked about, you know, ages and the type of people you can get on the water. I can't remember exactly what the girls were here, maybe 6 or 7 years of age, their own boards, paddling on the Liffey. And we were out on the water as a family paddling that day. And it is a fantastic sport. I've got a lot of clients and they will come down and they will paddle with their boys and their girls, mom and dad. They all get out on the water and they all have a time. And I think for that, it's a type of sport you want to get your kids involved in.
Super, thanks, Paul. Again, those photos are brilliant. I think a common theme among them all is the smile. smiles on everyone's faces when they're out on the sub boards. But I just have a really quick question now for both of you. So, Owen, I might go to you first. So, a quick technical question: what's your favorite piece of equipment?
Favorite piece of equipment. It's a piece of equipment that can be kind of applicable to all water sports. It's not specific to SUP, but one of the things we can find is that sometimes if you have a good day one day, and it could be another good day the following day, and another good day the following day, if it's during the winter time or late autumn, early spring, you still need your wetsuit. You still need to keep warm. And if you're lucky enough to have two wetsuits, you need to do them in rotation. So I have a thing called an X-Rail, which is a very neat piece of kit designed in Ireland, which is great because it means we can support local and we're not having to always buy in gear from abroad. And it's a very simple piece of kit that allows us to dry our wetsuits a bit quicker than normal, which means that we can be nice and toasty the following day when we go back out again. So yeah, simple kit called an X-Rail, made by a company called Exit.
Perfect. And now the same question to Paul.
You're way ahead of me there, Owen. That was a great plug for Kieran Salmon. He'll be very pleased with you. That's a difficult one, and I was on the water today foiling, and I was trying to think what is my favorite piece of equipment. And there's my equipment changes hands fairly quickly. As soon as I get really fond of a piece of equipment, I normally communicate that to the people on the water with me. And normally they end up wanting it and I end up selling it. But there's a particular board that I sold about 6 months ago, and I regretted selling it because it was one of my favorite boards. It was an 8'4". It's a surf sub. It was a green Steez that I had. For those that surf with me, they'll know the one I'm talking about. But the guy who bought it off me was looking for a new board there recently, and straight away I knew he had that board, and I said, yeah, we'll get you the new board. And listen, what I'll do is I'll take that green board, that Steez that I sold you 6 months ago, I'll take that as a trade in, and I'll be able to get your board at a really good price. And I don't know whether John is watching tonight, but John took the bait, hook, line and sinker. Boom, jumped at it. He thought he was getting a great deal, and he was getting a great deal, don't get me wrong. But I managed to get that little green board back, and now this time it's not going anywhere. So it's not for sale. Devon, Sirrigan, anyone that's looking for it, it's not for sale. It's not going anywhere.
Brilliant. Now, just another quick question for Eoin, and we'll see some more photos of Owen's there. Eoin, it's well known that stand-up paddleboarding, and we've gone kind of through, is great for fitness. It's a social activity. It can be competitive, like what Paul's done, but ultimately it's a sport that's good for the soul. What kind of effect does it have on people's well-being?
An effect that I think people sometimes don't always necessarily recognize or realize. Paul mentioned a phrase a little while back there, blue mind. And there's a book which, if anyone is interested, if you look it up, blue mind is a very scientific idea. It's not just an airy-fairy notion. And it's something that we experience when we go on the water. And for me, personally, in 2019, I had some very acute mental health issues, which took me off the water for about 12 months, a little longer than 12 months. And I became a shell of myself. I had a breakdown essentially, and so I ended up without the water in my life, and I really wanted to get back into the water, but it was very difficult to find the confidence that I'd instilled in other people to get on the water, and all of a sudden I didn't have it myself. And I'll always remember the day that I got back on the water, and there's an image of it coming up shortly. It was with me and Carolina, my partner, and it was only in about 5 foot of water, and I didn't stand up on the board, she was on the back of it, and we just paddled. And that moment it was like being, I know there's a cliche phrase, it was like being reborn, but there was definitely a feeling of being at home again. And so when you've had a really rough week or a rough day, or just have a lot of cares in your life at the time, or a lot of worries, you can go out on the water, and for an hour or for half an hour or however long, you can just take yourself away from all of that, or just clear your head, and come back out of the water with a new sense of purpose, a new sense of well-being. And it does a lot for the soul. It does a lot for your well-being. So not only physically, but mentally as well.
Thank you, Eoin. That's great to hear that. It's a really, and actually just, I know we're going to look at your photos now, second batch of photos, Eoin, but hearing Paul's and your story, how personal it is, it's so real. So thank you for sharing that with us. Right, let's have a look at the photos. Eoin, second group of photos, please.
So this first one is that moment I just spoke about. It's the moment when when I hit the water again, after a long period of time off it, and I had looked so longingly at the water for probably about 6 months previous to that, maybe 3 or 4 months. And I so wanted to get back on the water, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't allow myself to get back on the water. It was such a challenge. And then one particular day, we just said we'd go for it, very simple. And that was a very, very happy moment that the two of us shared together. Caroline is probably a little bit more ecstatic than I am. I'm still probably a little bit nervous being back on the water. But yeah, in that moment, we were both as high as kites. And then this wasn't too long after that, actually. So I mentioned Substoked, and I mentioned there was a WhatsApp kind of group previous to that. And this was through that WhatsApp thread, which is now kind of expanded. And some of the people on here tonight might recognize themselves in that photo. It's a lot of the local Dublin suppers, let's say. And this is what we do. We just get together and we have a bit of fun. It was obviously before COVID-19 times. There's not much social distancing going on there, even though we are outdoors and the boards are quite long. In that moment, we were together. And again, if we just talk about well-being, you can see me there on the left-hand side in the center of the photo. And 3 or 4 months previous to that, I couldn't have even dreamed of putting myself in among all those people. I would have really struggled with it. But the water gave me the confidence to come back again and to be able to interact with people, to enjoy people's company, and to have a bit of fun as well, and allow myself to have a bit of fun. Day by day during the week, it's still tough. I still have bad days, but those moments when I'm out on the water, they're special. This particular trip is around Howth Head. So you'll see I'm there on the left-hand side of the photo. And then to the right is a friend of mine called Robin Brady. And there's, I think, Sinead Hegarty is taking this photo. And this is a 10-kilometer paddle from Sutton Dinghy Club on the south side of Howth Head around to the north side of where Howth Harbour is. And this was taken about halfway at the Bailey Lighthouse. It's a phenomenal trip. You see everything from little caves to old swimming holes to the lighthouse itself to birds nesting, sea life, a bit of everything you see. But I think the important thing to hammer home in this particular image as well is that if you're a new supper or you're someone who hasn't necessarily paddled a particular location before, and you see people out there and you see them paddling, don't necessarily assume that it's going to be an easy place to paddle. There's a couple of very specific things on this trip that you need to know in order to make it a comfortable paddle. It's not hard if you know what they are, particularly around the Bailey. There's a very fast tidal rip and our tidal current. And if you don't know about that, you could get caught in it. So you could have people walking on the Howth cliff walk, seeing people supping below them and say, oh, well, I've a board at home, I could go and do that, and find yourself in trouble very quickly. So it's something just to remember, and something to, I suppose, if you see others going out on trips and maybe get a sense that they're a new person or maybe not as experienced, no harm in offering a little bit of advice, obviously constructively positive, rather than being a fuddy-duddy telling them not to do it, This is a great trip, not a great trip, a great event that happens every year. It's called the Liffey Odyssey. And when I first did it, which would have been in 2017, I think there was about 5 suppers. 6 suppers in total. It's a kayak event predominantly, and they start up in the War Memorial Gardens, and they come down over the first weir there at Ringsend, sorry, not at Ringsend, at Island Bridge, and down through the Liffey, down to Ring, where they finish. And it's grown steadily over the years, and this is the year just gone. We managed to run the event even during COVID, because it was done very well with all the guidelines. And we had approximately 32, I think, suppers, and that was really special to see how many people had grown to love the sport, enjoy the sport, and get involved, and also to see the respect that the kayakers were giving us as well, because it's a predominantly kayak event, but they were happy to welcome us on board as well. So hopefully we'll have more next year, and the following year it'll just continue to grow. It was a special day. Paul mentioned winging earlier on, and he showed you himself foiling on a SUP foil board. So this is the wing that he was talking about, and this was the only time that I've had one in my hand so far. And pardon my technique, Paul. I know I'm all over the place in that particular photo, but it just shows that you can still be learning all the time. You can still have a bit of fun. This is where I took a regular SUP board and put a wing with it just to try it out and see what happened. Myself and a mate of mine, Daniel, we had great crack that day. We were exhausted by the end of it, but it was good fun. It just shows that there's always new things to learn, new things to try out. And this is back to myself and Paul. Actually, we organized these clinics last year. So one of the things that I was conscious of was that, all these people were getting boards, and coming back to the idea of not having the knowledge of, how to use a board properly, how to be safe on a board, how to be efficient, etc. So I contacted Paul and I said, look, I have an idea to run some very simple clinics. We promote them through the SUPSTOVE community, and see how many people we can get involved. And it was brilliant. I think over 3 or 4 clinics, if I remember correctly, we had about 50 people per clinic get involved. And it was done in such a cordial, amicable, friendly way. And Paul was he's the super teacher that he is, that I think everyone took bucket loads of information away with them from those. So, we might try and do the same again this year, hopefully, because there'll be new paddlers and there'll be all who want to learn new things or just a refresher. But those clinics were special. It was great to get people together. And again, we were able to manage it in the guidelines that we had to operate in at the time, which was great. This is, I love this photo just because it shows how small a SUP board is in a way. So that's 4 of us in Hoth Harbour, in and around the marina. And you can just see from the sense of, the height there, if we think of a boat, and some of us may have been up close and personal with a boat in previous times, and you might think that they're small, or that they're not huge. But then when you put a SUP board beside them, you just realize how small they are. And even when you're on them, you think they're maybe big. But so it's important to remember that as well. Again, and I hope I don't sound like I'm harping on too much about it, but from a safety perspective as well, that if you are out on a board and you're in trouble, if you're too far out, you won't be seen, and that's something to bear in mind. So, but I just like that photo as well, just for the aesthetics of it. I just think it's a fantastic photo to show. This was last summer. That's Carolina in the middle there, and hiding in the tent is Robin, and that was on Dalkey Island. So we took a trip. So I decided I had to go southside for a day, and then we went down to Dalkey Island, which was another special. Again, one of those, you need to be careful, and you need to have some sort of local knowledge as to what's going on there, because there's a very, very strong tidal flow that runs between the island and the coastline. And if you're not aware of it, it will rip you through past the island very, very quickly, and you'll find yourself down in Killiney and further south, or further north going the other direction. So just to be careful, but it's a fantastic island. There's goats on the island, which I didn't know until that day when I got there, and that there was a flock of wild goats, or a herd of wild goats. But it was just a great day, and we really enjoyed it. It was a lovely sunny day in the middle of summer. This is actually in the Midlands. So I came away from the coast for a little while to do a little bit of touring in the Midlands. And this is a lovely river loop that you can do. It starts in Barry, and it's Kernan, so it takes you along. It's about a 10 to 12 kilometer loop that it's unusual that it starts and finishes in the same place, but you never have to backtrack on yourself. So you start by going down a small old canal down onto the Kernan River, and then it brings you up onto the Shannon, and you go north to south down the Shannon again. And it was a lovely day. To get out again in the middle of all those lockdowns last year, just to be able to get out and do something was nice. And you'll see a little gadget that I've built there, which is a little trailer from stuff that I've put a little camera on, to just get a different view of what it's like on the water. So it's great to be able to try out new things like that, and some work, some don't. That one still needs a little bit of refining, but hopefully in years to come we'll see more of those things being built. This was the highlight of my year last year on the SUP boards. It was a Christmas SUP that I organised again through our online community. And we started, it was the same route as they do in the Liffey Odyssey, so started at the War Memorial Gardens down to Ringsend, and it was only meant to be us. It was only meant to be a bit of crack for us, where we got dressed up in, you know, some sort of Christmas gear and had a bit of crack on the water. But it turned into a huge public event by the time we were finished. That's me in the middle, dressed as Santa Claus. That's Carolina to my left as Mrs. Claus, and then that's all Santa's little helpers around me. And if you look in the background there in the mist, you can see the Halfpenny Bridge, and you can see all the people on it. And as we were coming up to each bridge, but when we started, there wasn't very many people around. It says we came down through Island Bridge, but as we started to hit the bridges, as we went further along, these people just came out of nowhere and they started cheering. I got into Santa mode and I started doing the ho, 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 Merry Christmas and all that kind of thing. And by the time we got to O'Connell, we had streams of people either side of the river, kids, adults, everyone. And it was just a super, super day. And there was videos of it that went viral online, and everyone was wondering who Santa was and that kind of stuff. And it was just great. It was super fun, a really, really nice way to spend a happy Christmas moment. And this last one is, people think I'm mad sometimes, but it's very important to keep your in good shape so that it can provide you with good sessions. And so I shower my board after every session. That's a portable shower that I have, and I take it with me every time I go, and I shower down the board with fresh water. So, you know, it's a little photo. You know, you don't often see people showering things on the street. So there you go. That was me after getting out of Portmarnock about 2 weeks ago, and just washing down the board afterwards. So there you go.
Thanks a million, Eoin. I especially love the Santa photo. It's brilliant. Okay, so I have one final question for you both, and it's a nice wrap-up question. So, what message would you have for anyone thinking about taking up paddleboarding? So, I might go to Paul first, if that's okay.
If you're still viewing at this stage, guys, I think you got to do it. Just get out there and paddle and have fun. You know, there is the old cliche, Eoin touched on it, and I've heard so many people talk about it. SUP changes your life. It really does. It changes the perspective on things. It's very, very addictive. So beware, because once you start, who knows where it's going to lead. Get out there, enjoy it.
Right, and Eoin?
I would I'd echo that, and I would also say that for me, sometimes when it's new, when it's someone new getting involved in the sport, I wish they could take the word stand out of it, just for maybe the first session, so that people can just get out on the board and feel comfortable sitting down, kneeling, lying, standing, whatever they feel comfortable with, to get out on the water and just enjoy it. You don't have to be able to stand the first time you go out. You know, just get out, find your balance, and have a bit of fun. And after that, it'll all come. So that's the important one for me.
Thank you, Eoin. And just really quickly about the chat box, just to move. Mary from Enniscrone was asking about her teenage lads about boards to recommend. So that's something, I suppose it's great. Owen's created the link, so that could be a great starting point for her to learn and get advice and join the forum. And so that, thanks Owen for putting that link in. Ray compliments Paul's instructor abilities. and Eoin's clinic. So Ray's a massive supporter. There's been various questions about like inflatables. So again, that's been kind of touched on, or you'd be able to find more through the forum. So look, because of time wise, we won't kind of dwell too long on chat questions. But just to really kind of say the final word really to everyone, on behalf of Camilla, Hedda and myself, we really want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and to our incredibly inspiring guests that have joined us, Eoin and Paul, thank you. Next week, we are having our last episode in the series, focusing on an incredible sailing adventure that you'd love to hear. Keep in touch with Clean Coast to find out details, which will be announced over the next day or two. We're about to show a slideshow with all the images to finish. It's just a few minutes, that's all, but it's just to kind of end the event. Just to lead us there, I just want to borrow just a few words from Walt Whitman. Gliding over all, through nature, time and space, as a ship on the waters advancing, the voyage of the soul. Thank you very much, everyone, for registering and tuning in tonight. The event will finish at the end of the slideshow. So thank you very much, Paul and Eoin.
Thank you, Aidan. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you very much.